This episode is brought to you by TikTok for Business. Brat summer is over, but TikTok for Business is just getting started. Whether your marketing goals are brand, performance, or full funnel related, leverage TikTok for Business's insights to drive business growth. Learn more at tiktok.com/business. Hello, listeners. Today is Wednesday, October 30th. Welcome to Behind the Numbers, Reimagining Retail, an eMarketer podcast. This is the show where we talk about how retail collides with every part of our lives. I'm your host, Sara Lebow. Today's episode is our October Unofficial Most Interesting Retailers of the Month list. Before we count down today's list, let's meet our guests. Joining me for today's episode, we have three of our analysts. First up, it's fellow committee member Becky Schilling. Hey, Becky.
Hello.
Also with us, Sky Canaves. Hey, Sky.
Hey, Sarah.
And rounding out this group is fellow Sara Marzano.
Hi there.
Hello. Okay, let's jump into the Unofficial Most Interesting Retailers of the Month list. Since tomorrow is Halloween, we're doing something a little different and giving our list a spooky theme. This week, we'll be counting down 8 interesting retailers Becky and I have come up with that have come back from the dead, or at least come back from a difficult spot. Not all of these retailers have actually died. In fact, they're all very much alive. Becky and I will present our list in the first half of the episode, and in the second half, Sara and Sky will have the opportunity to edit our list. So here is that list. Number 8, Bed Bath & Beyond. Probably no surprise that we're starting out our list with Bed Bath & Beyond, which filed for bankruptcy back in April of this year. The brand just announced that it's partnering with Kirkland's to open several new small format stores next year. I think there are about 5 stores that they're opening, and it made its products available at the Container Store. So this is, I think, our most classic I'm Not Dead Yet brand, still finding ways to stay relevant. Number 7, Kohl's. Kohl's has added a bunch of new brands, it expanded its holiday gift assortment, and it relaunched 2000's kids staple Limited 2, which we've talked about on this pod before. Kohl's has also long offered Amazon returns to bring people into its stores, but that has not been super successful for Kohl's. Honestly, not a lot of these things have been huge successes for Kohl's, but they are still experimenting to try and keep people in stores.
I feel like this, the things that Kohl's has announced recently, the lower priced line from Nadam, the expanded assortment of holiday goods, it sort of feels like a continuation of kind of trying a little bit of everything and hoping that something sticks. I think what I wish I could see from Kohl's is like more of a cohesive, focused effort on the turnaround. I just don't necessarily feel like there's a real theme emerging. It's just continuing to try a little bit of everything.
Right. And they've already pulled some big levers, as you mentioned, Sarah, with the Amazon Returns Hub and the Sephora shop-in-shops. And if those aren't enough to move the needle in a significant way, then I don't think adding brands or smaller shop-in-shops in bits and pieces is going to do much, especially their sales have been declining. Previous quarter comps were down, and they really need to rethink the whole store in a more holistic way, as you said.
Yeah, if I were Kohl's, I would be leaning into Kohl's Cash in some way. I feel like that's its brand identity, is Kohl's Cash, and people want rewards right now. I would find a way to revamp that program. At number 6, we have Lidl. Becky, what has Lidl been up to?
Yeah, so back in 2017 when Lidl was making its U.S. entrance, everyone in the grocery business was super excited about it. It came in with a bang and it just fluttered. Unfortunately, it has not had the same impact that fellow discounter and German grocer Aldi has had in the U.S., and they recognize that, and they are launching a new marketing campaign to reintroduce the brand to its U.S. customers and try to get people to recognize the brand, come into the stores, and frequent them. So that is why we picked Aldi for number 6.
Nope, we picked Lidl for number 6,
so
but I
sorry.
think that's a really solid example.
Yeah, exactly. The brand identity. There's so much confusion there.
No, they're both like 4-letter brands. They kind of look alike. They kind of sound alike. I think Lidl needs to do something to seem different from Aldi, and that's exactly what they're doing.
Well, and I think part of the problem was also that consumers didn't even recognize Lidl as a grocery store, right? Like they, and that's part of why the campaign is around like literally being a supermarket. Like it's very much starting from scratch, which is sort of surprising for a retailer that has been in the US for, as Becky mentioned, quite some time at this point. Like, we're really starting from bare bones of like, hey, we're a grocery store, and then we'll focus maybe on differentiating ourselves from Aldi.
Because they're so much smaller than Aldi and focused in, a limited region, mainly in the Northeast. So I think consumers in a lot of the rest of the country just don't even know about them. They just know about Aldi. And it seems like they're also kind of leaving some money on the table, because I saw a report from Placer AI that noted that Lidl shoppers tend to have above average incomes relative to the locations of their stores. And for Aldi, it's the opposite. The Aldi shopper income skews lower than average, which I think is what you want to target when you're a lower priced, value oriented grocer.
Yeah, I mean, Aldi is great for if you're shopping on a budget. Lidl does not have those same associations in the US right now. Okay, number 5, CVS. Becky, what is CVS up to?
Yeah, so I mean, we could have picked a host of anyone from the drug and pharmacy side of the world. They're struggling mightily for the most part, but CVS is doing some really interesting things to try to push itself forward. It launched a new private label line called Well Market to try to help consumers with some of the brand confusion that people can see whenever they're shopping within CVS stores. They also launched a self-service retail media ad partnership with the Trade Desk to try to elevate their retail media program and to try to get some more advertisers in through the door that way.
Could you see CVS buying like a capsule or a Hims or one of those D2C pharmacies that I feel like everyone is using now?
That would be really interesting, because there is a lot more of the pharmacy side of these stores is moving online and moving to other channels as well, like supermarkets and wholesale stores like Costco are doing really well in pharmacy. And so they really have to rethink what they're for. Because right now, for me, there's a zombie CVS in my neighborhood, and it's across the street from the still standing Walgreens, which I hope doesn't close, because I go there if I need something right away that's like a few minutes away or downstairs. But too often, if they're closing their stores or leaving the products that are left in their stores behind glass cases and locking them up, then it kind of defeats the whole purpose of convenience that consumers are willing to pay a little bit more for.
I couldn't get a yogurt yesterday from the Duane Reade. A little self-serve yogurt. I had to get somebody to come and open the case for me.
CVS even has, like, with its super long receipts, like mummy-like effects.
Spooky.
I saw a Halloween costume of that once, a CVS receipt, and it's still stuck in my head. It was brilliant.
I love that.
Yeah, that's a really good costume. And honestly, a CVS mummy would be easy to do. You only need like 2 CVS trips to get enough receipt for it.
You just have to be able to buy enough stuff, which is tough with everything being locked up.
True. Okay, number 4, Abercrombie and Fitch. This is another 2000s kids staple, maybe like young adult staple. Abercrombie and Fitch is a brand that became, I don't want to say irrelevant, but definitely got a bad association with it toward the late 2000s, early 2010s. As we all know, Abercrombie & Fitch has completely revamped with way more inclusive marketing and has made its styles much more updated as well, so it's not lingering in the 2000s.
I think Abercrombie has been such a fun, like, celebrated brand comeback story. There are sort of a lot of marketing case studies around their turnaround and their comeback. And one of my favorite things is them putting Fran Horowitz, who is a merchant, in the CEO role back in 2017, because I think a lot of the strategic levers you can pull as a retailer looking to juice your business or execute a turnaround will mean nothing without a great product strategy and assortment. So I think you can see a lot of the sort of proof of her strength as a merchant kind of playing out within their strategy.
Right, because they're no longer a teen brand. They're now a younger millennial brand, and they provide clothing that serves that demographic, including office wear. They've done really well with their dressy wear for weddings. They have a whole section on that. And then in addition to the elevated basics like jeans and hoodies, but the teens can, go to one of their lower price lines.
And I think another thing that's interesting to me about like Abercrombie is I feel like it part of a group of mall brands who are sort of growing up and making a comeback. And Sky, to your point, sort of serving that grown-up millennial customer who maybe used to shop there when they were younger. And it's sort of exciting to see this turnaround for some of these mall brands, which I think stands in stark contrast to department stores, right? Who have been struggling and looking at a really sort of bleak outlook for some time, and can't really blame the decline of mall traffic anymore because we're seeing a big uptick in foot traffic to malls.
Yeah, Abercrombie has really grown up with its clientele. I think that mall conversation is a good segue into our next brand, number 3, Victoria's Secret. This is almost just like Abercrombie. I mean, this is a brand that was known for exclusivity, not inclusivity. And as a result, its iconic fashion show went away for many years because it was associated with exclusivity. It just brought its fashion show back this year with slightly more body inclusive approach than it has in the past, and even had iconic model Tyra Banks once again walking in that fashion show. So it also brought in the nostalgia aspect, and it's just expanded its image.
Yeah, I think this one is similar to Abercrombie in terms of like what it's trying to come back from. But I think the efforts that they've made and how far they've come actually stand in stark contrast to what Abercrombie has been able to do. So to your point, they canceled their fashion show. I think it was 6 years ago. And that was sort of in the wake of the Me Too movement. But then they fumbled sort of that subsequent rebrand where they sort of said, hey, we're going to back up from this. We're going to become super inclusive. And now it sort of feels like they're saying like, okay, let's reverse course and try to have everything we had before, but also do it in an inclusive way. And I was just sort of thinking, I feel like this is like, I don't know if there's a industry term for this, but it feels like the sort of greenwashing like version of inclusivity. Yeah, where it's just, it feels really tone deaf. It's ringing hollow. It feels like they're trying to sort of have their cake and eat it too. And I just don't think the fashion show accomplished what they were hoping it was going to accomplish.
Yeah. I think that a lot of the fashion show efforts hinged on plus-size supermodel Ashley Graham, who has been critical of the brand before, being like, I now see myself in the brand and am walking in the show. I think that hanging your brand on one person, one plus-size model, now being accepting of the brand might not win consumers back the way that they might hope.
And it makes me wonder, who are the consumers that they're targeting? Are they looking for the younger demographic? I mean, I was pleased to see that there was a bit more diversity and spanning not just body size, but ethnicity and trans models as well. But I think most of the diversity I saw was the age diversity, and that's because they brought back the supermodels from back in the day. And so are they trying to appeal to the Gen X demographic instead, who was their customer back in the 2000s?
Yeah, I'm actually not convinced that Victoria's Secret has been or will be successful with size diversity at all.
And I feel like this is another retailer who like there's a reason we're all sort of confused in terms of who they're trying to appeal to, right? Because there's not a very clear cohesive strategy that's coming through some of their moves. We've talked about this on the podcast before, but I think it will be interesting to see what Hilary Super, who is the new CEO that they just brought in recently from Fenty, is able to execute here. But yeah, this is a brand who has lost a lot of market share to brands like Skims, brands like Fenty. And I don't think the fashion show is what it's going to be to bring this back into the sort of favor of today's consumer.
Okay, number 2, Gap. Becky, tell us what is going on with Gap.
Yeah, I mean, Gap has had a little bit of an identity crisis too, right? So they are trying to become more culturally relevant. They hired Zach Posen earlier this year. He's a big name with a lot of interest. He has a lot of cachet too in the industry. So they're hoping that they can get more people in the door to come back into their stores, to buy their products, to wear their products. They're also being really smart about their marketing. They're still using their marketing dollars in a big way, but they're being more efficient about how they're doing that. And they're focusing on brand storytelling across platforms. And we're seeing some signs in their recent financial reports that it seems to be working.
Yeah, I'm kind of excited about Gap. I think they're doing a great job with the buzzy brand collaborations that are so much better than the collaboration with Ye, because they now have brand partners that really resonate with the shoppers who want to spend on designer, but maybe in a more affordable way. I'm thinking of like Cult Gaia and Doen. And so these are still priced, I think, a bit more premium than regular Gap, or more than consumers have been conditioned to expect, because Gap for a long time offered so many coupons and promos that shoppers then ended up not being willing to pay full price. They're expecting 40% off. But when there's a really well-designed and thought-out product or collection and it's limited in quantity, then it becomes more desirable. And that's what, fashion should be all about. And they kind of are elevating their image. And the latest one that I saw is they collaborated with an influencer who came up with the TikTok phrase about hoodies that hoodie, looking for the perfect hoodie. And that's really savvy because they're now leveraging that interest and that collaboration with a creator. Whereas I think a few years ago when Gap hoodies started to come back and gain traction with Gen Z, they kind of dropped the ball on that trend, and now they're able to bring it back. So I think they're kind of winning on this one.
Yeah, I'm excited about Gap too. I think it's no small task to think about turning around all 4 banners that sort of operate under the Gap Inc. label. And I think, Sky, you're absolutely right that one of the key elements here is going to be crawling out of this never-ending discounting sort of race to the bottom that has really eroded a lot of the brand equity across the banners, and creating some scarcity, creating some elevation with some of these collaborations, and sort of really focusing on infusing the brand with a bit more value in the eyes of the consumer are going to be a key part of that.
All right, number 1, Amazon Fresh. Becky, bring us home with Amazon Fresh's revamp.
Yeah, I mean, Amazon makes this list almost every single month, so it maybe at first blanch seems a little confusing to have Amazon and retailers that are making a comeback, but Amazon has struggled mightily with the Amazon Fresh brand, and they're doing a lot of things to try to make a comeback. They were very honest that they were not getting it right, and so they're trying new things and they're testing new things. They're building a new micro-fulfillment center next to a Whole Foods that would enable shoppers to order from Amazon's website, Amazon Fresh, and then pick it up in store. They're testing a new small format store next to a Whole Foods in Chicago that's going to offer a wider variety of products, including some of the brand name products that don't make it into a Whole Foods due to that brand's ingredient restrictions. They've overhauled 26 Amazon Fresh fulfillment centers. They're launching other small formats. They're just trying a lot of things to try to see what can work with an Amazon Fresh product.
When I was reading about this sort of new, like the idea that folks are going to Whole Foods, but then they're also conducting, the remainder of they're topping off their grocery shopping elsewhere in order to get some of those national brands or things that don't fit into the Whole Foods assortment, makes sense. But I think from a purely logistical standpoint, the friction of still having to go to another grocery store is still there. You still have to check out twice and do something with all of your bags. And I live in a city, so I'm not using a car to do these things. So that sort of stood out to me. And I think Amazon is being transparent about the fact that they are sort of testing and learning within the grocery space. But while they are doing all of this testing and learning, their competitors are sort of solidifying their market share within this category and creating a lot of stickiness. I look to Walmart's paid membership program, where they've seen a significant increase in the share of consumers who are paying for that program. So I don't think Amazon has all the time in the world to sort of keep testing and learning and iterating here.
Okay, so rounding out our list, we have number 8, Bed Bath & Beyond, number 7, Kohl's, number 6, Lidl, number 5, CVS, number 4, Abercrombie & Fitch, number 3, Victoria's Secret, number 2, Gap, and number 1, Amazon Fresh. We also included an honorable mention for 9 and 10. At 9, we have JCPenney, which has been making a lot of moves similar to Kohl's. And at 10, we have Barnes & Noble for revamping its bookstores. Now it's time for our second half, where Sky and Sara have the opportunity to tell us where we went wrong. Each of them will have a chance to move a company up or down our rankings list and to add a new one entirely. So, Sky, why don't you go first and make a move up or down?
Okay, I would take Bed Bath & Beyond just off the list. I don't think they're coming back from the Beyond. Their strategy since they went out of business and got bought out by Overstock has been really muddled with name changes and plan changes. And the fact is, there's too much competition from Amazon. So much of the sales in their category have shifted online, and particularly to Amazon. So when I look at our forecast for Amazon's share of the home furnishings category, and this is for total U.S. retail, not just e-commerce for the category, but total, it was less than 9% in 2019. And according to our forecast, it's going to be closer to a quarter of the total by 2026. And that's because there are so many more brands selling on Amazon. It's easy, it's convenient. And then they have big sales events like Prime Days now twice a year where you can really save even more on these items. So you don't need those 20% off coupons from Bed Bath & Beyond anymore.
So you think it's Bed Bath and the Beyond?
Yes.
Bed Bath going to the Beyond.
It's just a little bit of a death rattle.
I mean, we put Bed Bath & Beyond at 8 for a reason. I feel like it's like the zombie retailer, but
it won't go away.
Yeah, it is toward the bottom.
I don't think we think they're going to be successful with what they're doing, right? I don't know that anybody is willing to stick their neck out and buy that. But I do think what they're trying to do is something new and something interesting. And so I think for that reason, that's why we included them on the list.
I think that we should keep them at 8, but understand that they might fall off if we're convinced a new brand should come onto the list. Becky, do you agree with that?
I agree with that.
All right. Sarah, make your move.
I want to bump Amazon Fresh from its number 1 spot. I think we can slot them in somewhere around number 4 or 5. I just think this is too small to constitute a comeback, right? It's, like I said, when we were discussing the retailer, this is sort of another small test and learn effort. I just sort of take issue that we can say like Amazon Fresh is back from the dead.
Becky, you were the one who made the argument for Amazon Fresh being number 1 when we made this list. What was your justification there?
Twofold. One, I think Amazon, there's such a dichotomy with Amazon. Like they're so successful, so successful, and they cannot get their brick and mortar strategy correct. And so I think it was very interesting that they came out and said that. And they were very transparent and said, listen, it's not working. We get it. We're going to stop. We're going to halt. And we're going to try some things. And I think for a brand to acknowledge it and then to actually come back and try some things, the tactics that they're using are very different from what they had before. And they are trying some new small formats. They're trying to get new customers in there. They're trying to take advantage of the things that work well for Amazon. And they're trying to pull all of those threads together to build something that would be successful. Whether or not that actually comes to fruition, I think it's all very much up to debate and maybe on the not going to work side. But I do think that what they're doing is very interesting.
I think they get points for humility there, but if you put them right, if you have Amazon Fresh at number 1 and then you have Gap, which has, I think it's been, there's been several quarters of positive comp sales over at Gap. Like I just can't justify that order.
Yeah, I think grocery is like top importance for Amazon in its retail ambitions, and the Amazon Fresh moves certainly play a part in that, but I don't think they've yielded the results quite yet, and we're still waiting to see how they figure out their bigger strategy with all 3 parts and integrating online and stores.
So I'm really convinced of Gap, Victoria's Secret, and Abercrombie & Fitch all being interesting. So moving Amazon Fresh behind those doesn't seem like that big a demotion to me, since those are all so interesting to me. I would be open to moving it to number 4.
I would be open to swapping Amazon and Gap, but I would not put Amazon Fresh below Victoria's Secret.
All right, we'll compromise. We'll put Amazon Fresh at number 2 and Gap at number 1. Okay, now is your opportunity to add a wild card to this list and see if we can actually knock some folks off of the list. Sarah, why don't you go first with your wild card and where you would put it?
Sure. So my wild card is Adidas. It has been about 2 years since they shut down their Yeezy business, which was a massive hit. I was reading that at the time it was about 8% of the company's revenue. Wow. They are still working to offload the Yeezy inventory. And it's worth noting that I think the sales that they're generating from that inventory is still something that's sort of impacting their sort of top line sales. But they're divesting themselves of that business. And then they also shut down their business in Russia following that country's invasion of Ukraine, which is their biggest. I'm taking this very global global, but it was their biggest D2C market, which that was interesting. They have a new CEO who came in 2023, who came from Puma. And I think they are starting to see some of the payoffs of their strategic turnaround. So they've scaled up production of the Samba. They acted really quickly on that. They're really focusing on the strength of their wholesale business, which sort of flies in the face of the strategic shift to D2C that so many brands were focusing on over the past few years. They're leaning back into sport and performance. And I think they have a real opportunity in North America to seize on some of the white space that may be created with Nike's current struggles. So I think this is a brand and retailer where we're seeing really sort of significant payoff from their turnaround efforts.
It's funny that Adidas CEO came from Puma. You know that Adidas and Puma were founded by brothers?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I love that some of the strategies that we're saying here is the like shutdown strategy, which I think, to be fair, a lot of brands struggle with, and they hold on to the things that aren't working because we did this and we invested in it, so we're going to stay with it. And I think it's really smart to say, hey, listen, this is not working for us. We're going to back out of this.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting that they're moving to wholesale also. That's interesting because we talk about that a lot with like Nike. But then the other thing is it's interesting that we have two brands potentially on this list that are on it in part because they had to back out of a Kanye West partnership.
I know. I was thinking about that too with Gap.
Where did you say you would put Adidas?
Oh, sorry. I don't think I did. I want to put them ahead of Victoria's Secret.
Oh, wow. That's up there.
Yeah, I know. But I feel like this is another one that I feel really strongly about, like Gap, because you're actually seeing like some of these strategic, the efforts sort of make sense. They feel like they are cohesive and focused, and we're starting to see them really pay off. And particularly, I thought the wholesale strategy was interesting. I was reading that they are prioritizing bringing their new product launches to their retail partners at the same time that they're bringing it to D2C, and just really leaning into the strength of those partnerships and sort of recognizing what that does for their distribution, what that does for how they show up to the customer. And again, I think Victoria's Secret, it sort of just remains to be seen whether some of what they're trying is going to prove successful in terms of a turnaround.
Yeah, I think their results speak for themselves, and they've also captured a lot of the buzz from Nike. I know among Gen Z and the back-to-school hauls, everyone had Adidas shoes that they were showing off, and very few Nikes were in there this year. So they've definitely captured the buzz and have the Gen Z fandom behind them now.
Adidas hasn't really been on my radar, which could speak to me, but also like the Olympics happened. I'm engaged in watching football and baseball right now and women's basketball, and I haven't really seen that much Adidas.
One of the things that they discussed in terms of their strategic turnaround is the fact that the CEO, whose name is Bjorn Gulden, was focused on sort of strengthening their relationship with athletes. He felt like they had really lost their way as a sport and performance brand and had over-indexed on the lifestyle category. So I think it makes sense that you're sort of observing this and saying this, and it is something that they are working to change. I'm not sure that American football will be where that happens.
That makes sense. I'm convinced. You've convinced me.
Woo!
I'm convinced to add it to the list. I think that all the moves that they're doing are really smart. And I think that sometimes there's a difference between smart and interesting. And I think for me, that would be the sticking point that I would say that I would add them to the list. But I think their moves are really smart business moves, but they're not necessarily the interesting business moves.
So why don't we stick them below Abercrombie & Fitch at number 5?
I agree with that.
All right.
Works for me.
Sky, what is your wild card and where would you put it?
So my wild card is another retailer that has been out of business and coming back really from not being in business. And that's Toys R Us, which originally went bankrupt in 2018 and then started to come back a few years ago through partnership with Macy's from its current owner, which is a brand management firm. And it's been operating pop-ups in Macy's stores across the country. I think they're now in every Macy's store as a shop within Macy's toy department. And the news this past week was that they just opened their first standalone store in Chicago, and with events and big store opening and giveaways. And I think that can help start to fill a gap in this market because so much of the toy business has moved away from specialty stores to big box and then online, of course, to Amazon. But when you say toys, you think of stores. The two go hand in hand. And so there's a gap in the market because we've lost part of that. And I think some of the other brands and retailers like Lego and Camp, which is much smaller, have been successful in the toy space. And a big part of that comes from experiences. So I think a lot of it will depend on how well they can leverage experiences and really well-curated selections to get consumers in the door and bring the toy store back.
I'm not as convinced of this one. I think if Bed Bath & Beyond has sort of fallen off our list, then Toys R Us isn't really interesting either. They are sort of two peas in a pod for going out of business and attempting to re-enter the playing field. Macy's was actually a brand that we were talking about maybe putting on the list, and we knocked it off just because we thought they were sort of scrambling and not necessarily doing enough that's interesting. And so I don't know that this Toys R Us partnership is all that interesting. I mean, Macy's sells stuff. It makes sense that they would add some more products. I think that these smaller players like Camp and like Lego are still doing more interesting things in this space than Toys R Us is.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about Toys R Us, whether or not we wanted to add it to the list. And I think that it goes back to I think they're definitely making a comeback, and they're doing it in a smart and strategic way. But I think the other brands and the retailers that we have on here are doing things that are a little bit more interesting. And so I would not include them on the list.
Okay, so that concludes our list. Our final list with those moves is number 8, Kohl's. Number 7, Lidl. Number 6, CVS. Number 5, Adidas. Number 4, Abercrombie & Fitch. Number 3, Victoria's Secret. Number 2, Amazon Fresh. And number 1, Gap. In that honorable mention spot, we have Bed Bath & Beyond and JCPenney.
Oh, I would have definitely put Barnes & Noble up and taken Bed Bath & Beyond off.
If we had more moves, that's what I was thinking too, Sky.
Because Barnes & Nobles is like, they're what I think of as like a potential opportunity for a store like Toys R Us, where they were kind of left for dead and then they've come back.
I know, I'm kind of
thanks to the experience. But we need more moves.
I like that move too. Can I have a move? I know I made the list, but can I have a move?
Take a move, Becky.
I want to put Barnes & Noble back on. I do.
Where are you putting it?
We can put it in I want 9.
9. All right. So we're adding Barnes & Noble into our honorable mention section. I think that's fair.
I co-sign this.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that is all we have time for today. So thank you each for joining me. Thank you, Becky.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thanks for having me.
And thank you, Sky.
Thanks. Always a pleasure.
Thank you to Victoria, who edits the podcast and keeps things from getting too scary around here. Please give us a rating and review wherever you listen to podcasts. We'll be back next Wednesday with another episode of Reimagining Retail, an eMarketer podcast made possible by TikTok. And tomorrow, join Marcus for another episode of the Behind the Numbers Daily. On November 1st, eMarketer is hosting a virtual summit. Learn all about the top trends of 2025 with a keynote from analysts Sarah Marzano and Evelyn Mitchell-Wolfe, panelists hosted by Kelsey Voss and Yori Wormser, and featuring executives from top brands. All of this starts at 11:30 Eastern on November 1st and is hosted by eMarketer's Vice President of Content, Susie David Canyon, and Senior Director of Client Briefings, Jeremy Goldman. Use the link in the show notes to register today.